Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.com, and welcome to the second half. Well, there might be a third video of this build. So in the first video, we built our Express API. Okay, so let me go back to here. And again, if you're looking for this code in the repository that's in the video description, it's going to be in the Express React folder. Okay, once I push it all up. Okay, so since the last video, I have deleted that user in my database since it got exposed because I did exactly what I told you not to do. Okay, so see, things, it's always easier to give advice than to follow it. But everything is all up and running. So now what we need to do is go focus on working on our front end. Okay, so we have the API running. We've tested it. I tested it in Insomnia. You could have also tested it in Postman or Thunder Client, whatever you like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the front end folder, open up this other terminal over here. Okay, and we're going to start working in React. Okay, so I'm going to hit, first I need to install a few things, npm install React router DOM. That's all I'm going to use for now. In the future, I might do a third video on styling, but we'll cross that bridge. npm install React router DOM. Let that install. While that installs, we can begin working. So essentially what's going to happen is that with the newest version of React Router DOM, you have this feature called the data routers. Now, essentially what that is, okay, it's essentially the features that if you ever use Remix.js, so Remix is one of these like React meta frameworks. So there's Remix, Gatsby, um, Hydrogen, Next.js, and more. Astro technically allows you to kind of do that up on React, but along on other frameworks as well. But essentially, like the router features are built now into the React Router DOM library. So basically, if you don't need the other features that Remix provides, which is mainly server-side rendering and the ability to make API routes, which is technically what we did with Express. We handled our server-side code with Express in this build. You can use React Router DOM. Okay, and yeah, no, I installed this in the wrong place. I didn't cd into my folder, so that's why that errored. So let me cd into front end and do npm install React router DOM. Okay, and then that all went smooth. Okay, but essentially this is going to allow us to use sort of two new concepts, which are not too new. I mean, technically, this is generally how you would build things if you were just building sort of a basic traditional app. Okay, but this is the idea of actions, which is technically how forms have always worked, where when you submit a form, it hits a route that's referred to as the action, and that sort of triggers something that happens and then redirects into another page. And then there's also the idea of a loader, which is a little bit more unique, which is basically just a function that loads data before the component renders. So using these two things, actions and loaders, we can simplify our build a lot. So that means no like need for like use effect, use state. A lot of things just become a lot less necessary for just basic stuff. Okay, so you're gonna see this becomes a lot simpler than you may have seen other React builds. So I'm really a fan of this. Okay, but first, so what I'm going to do is in the source folder, I'm going to create 3 files. I'm going to create router.js. That's going to be our router where we're going to define all our routes. We're going to create actions.js. That's where we're going to define all our action functions. And then we're going to create loaders.js, where we're going to define our loaders. Do you have to do them like this? No, I'm just doing it like this because I felt like this was a sensible way of organizing it. Okay, you could have a loaders folder and then have each thing be its own file. There's a bajillion different ways you could. Like I actually would maybe make this a little bit easier to see is if I make a new folder called router, and then let's move these files in there, just so that way they're all kind of nice and bundled together. Loaders and routes, or router. And actually what we'll do is we'll call that, well, we'll call it router still. Okay. And the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to just generate our router. Okay, so this is the basic setup for React Router now. So what I'm going to want to do is import create browser router. Okay, it's not seeing it right away, so we'll just do the whole thing. Create browser router from React router DOM. And then the other thing we're going to want to import from here is create routes from elements. And we're going to want to import the route component. Okay, so that's that. Then what we do is we're going to declare a variable called router, because this is going to be our router, the thing that defines our routes. And we're going to run this function, create browser router. And then we're going to want to create our router, which we can create from elements. So create routes from elements. And then what we do is we can just basically pass JSX to define our routes. And what we're going to do is I'm going to just put in a fragment. And then we can define all our routes within this fragment. So generally, I'll make our sort of basic route. So our route will be route path just for our main page. And then the element that route's going to render is going to be the app component. And that's it for now. And then we'll define subroutes, because basically what's going to happen is that app is going to be kind of like the wrapper for our application, and then we'll go forward from there. And then I need to import app here. Okay. From // there we go. Okay. And then we need to export the router. Export default router. So that should be the lowercase router. Okay, and there we go. That's my router for now. Okay. So I'll just hit save on this so that way it auto formats. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to head over to app.js and then, well, not app, index.js. We will import router provider from React router DOM. And then we're going to import the router we just created. And then I'm not going to need the app component here anymore. Okay, basically what we do is we replace this with a router provider. And then we provide the router provider a router, which is the variable we have of router. Okay, and so that basically is the entry point of our app. So app still becomes the entry point, but router provider really then is going to render that router, and our default route renders app. Okay, and then the last piece of what I want to do is in here, is right here in between the div. Oops, chopped too much. I'm going to clear out this div in app. And then what I'm going to say here is that here in app, what I want to do is I need to import the outlet component from React router. Okay, and then any subroutes are going to show up here in the outlet component. Okay, so that's where, again, any sub routes will show up, because generally everything is going to end up being a sub route the way we're going to do it. Okay, so that's set up. Okay, so just so you can see that it's working, let's kind of set up two routes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another folder for pages, new folder for pages. And we're going to generally have a page to display all of our cheeses. So we'll call that that matches our index, right, when we think of REST convention. So we'll call that page index. So index.js, and then we'll have a show page. So new file show.js, just to kind of follow our RESTful conventions of, show showing one thing and index showing all the things. So we'll just kind of first build these things out. So function index supposedly will receive props. We won't really be using props. Return h1 index, and then we export default index. And then we're going to do the same thing for show. So I'll use a multi-cursor feature in VS Code to update that. How easy was that? And now we're just going to add those to our routes. So the way I would do that is I'm going to import those components. So import index and import show. And the cool thing with the new React, the way the new React router works, is that not all your routes just represent UI. Okay, your routes can represent other things that are going to happen. Okay, so not every route has to render a component. Okay, so I can define, so I'm going to have a route that equals that whose path, and this is a subroute. And how do we know it's a subroute? It's because it's a child of this route. So whatever, if this route matches, it's going to show up where that outlet is. Okay, so path equals nothing because again, it's whatever is in addition to this. That's the way subroutes work. So nothing in addition to that. And element is going to equal index. Okay. And then, we'll just define a few more routes. And again, that should be route, not router. It's pronounced router. Okay, just Simpsons flashbacks. Okay. Now, next one, we're going to have our show, which is going to show a cheese of a particular ID. So we'll make that a param, and that's going to end up showing the show component. Those are going to be really the only two page components. But again, when we think about it, to get full CRUD, I'm going to have a form that's going to be submitted and result in creating a thing. So I'm going to make a route to handle that. So this route is not actually like a thing you see. This route is going to be something I can submit to, and you'll see how we can do that later on. But I'm going to have a route called create. That's just going to handle when we submit a create form. And the way that'll work is if you submit a post request to one of these routes via the built-in form that's built into React Router, it'll then trigger that route and the action associated with that route. You'll see this in action. It's actually really, really cool. Okay, then I will create another route. This one's going to be for updating, so we'll call this update, but we wanted to specify which thing we're updating, so a param there too. And then we're going to have a route for deleting. Okay. And there we go. So there's going to be all the routes we need for this particular build. Okay, it's a really simple CRUD. Again, you can get fancier with this, as fancy as you want, but this just kind of gives you a path that you can then iterate on. Cool. So now let's start this app so we can see it at work. npm start. Okay. So right now I don't see anything, so that means I must have made. Nope, there it goes. We see index. Okay, because again, that index route is a child route in our router, so it's showing up where the outlet is. Okay, so that works. Now if I were to go here and type in like /55, I'm gonna get the show route. Okay, there is no cheese 55, but you guys get the idea. Okay, so we know it's working. Wonderful. Now what I want is I don't want index to show up. When the index page is showing up, what I want to show is all the cheeses. Okay, so what I need to do is first I need to load that data. And the cool thing is usually what we would do is that I would have to go into this index page. I would have to like first create state to hold the cheeses. Then I would create a use effect. I'd make an API call from the use effect, update the state, and then I'd be able to display the cheeses. Okay, this becomes a lot simpler. What I can do is I can define a loader function. So in this file, we'll define that here, that I can then run before any particular. Now in that case, what's going to happen is that we're going to be using a URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a file to have that URL in, so that way I don't have to keep writing it 1,000 times. So I'm just going to have a file here, url.js, and I'm just going to say const, I'm just going to say export default, and then literally the string will just have the base URL, which is http localhost 4000, because that's where our API is running from right now. And yeah, that works for me. Okay, so now I can import that where I need it. So again, in this loaders file, I'm going to import URL from ./URL. Okay, so now that variable URL will have the URL, and I don't have to like, if I need to change it, I can just change it in that file. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export const. We'll call this index loader. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just, say, hey, it's the loader for that particular route. And it's going to take a function. Now this function, I don't need any of the arguments, so right now I'm just not going to take anything in. There's stuff that there's stuff that gets passed, but again, we'll use it as we need it. Okay, and in this one, all I really want to do is make the API calls. So I want to make this an async function because I'm doing async things. And we're going to say const response equals fetch, which we should await, await fetch URL plus slash cheese. I think the way we set it up in our backend. Let me go to our server.js and yeah, slash cheese. Okay. So let me go back to loaders.js. Okay. So that's going to go do the fetch, but then we're going to want to turn that into cheeses. So we'll await response.json. That'll convert the response into a JavaScript object. And then we can return that data. Cool. That's it. That function will go get the cheeses. And what I want to do is attach that to that route. So I go to my router, I find the route in question, the index route here. And I'm going to say, hey, when this route is loaded, I want you to run this loader. This function will run. So we're going to call it the index loader. That's what we named the function. It automatically imports it for me because VS Code is sweet like that. Okay. If it doesn't automatically import it, make sure you import it. Okay. But there it is. So now what's going to happen is that whenever I go to the index route, that's automatically going to load. That loader function will run, and now I can make use of that data. The way I use that data, oops. If I want to use that data, all I have to do is import use loader data. So use loader data hook from React Router DOM. And then the return value of that use loader data is the return value of the loader function. So that means those cheeses. So I can just be like const cheeses equals use loader data. Okay. Then we can create like a div here. Okay, and then we can just say right here, we'll say cheeses dot map. And then for each cheese, I want to return a div. Each div will have a key because we want to not get that error or that warning, which will just be the cheeses ID. And since we're using Mongo, that should be underscore ID. Okay, cheese div key cheese ID. And we're just going to say h1 and have the name of the cheese. So that'd be cheese.name. And then we're going to have a little thing that shows if it's tasty or not. So I will use a ternary operator here. So I'll say if cheese.tasty is true, then we will put it's tasty. And if it's not tasty, we'll put not tasty. Okay, perfect. Okay, right now I think there's only what, like 1 or 2 cheeses in there. So let me refresh this. Failed to fetch. Okay. Let's see here. Let me think about why that would fail to fetch. Loader const fetch URL. The URL is localhost 4000. This should be running on localhost 4000. Oh, my server isn't running. That is why. Oh, because it was like an error of some sort at some point. What was it? Get slash cheese 400. Okay, so let's rerun this. Okay, it's connected. Let me just again hit the API real quick, make sure it's working. So if I do, let's just make this re. Atlas error code name. That's a new one. Atlas error 8000. So let's try that out. Copy. Atlas error. Bad authentication. Okay, so that's telling me authentication failed. So that's telling me I should go update the authentication. So I'm going to head back over here. For some reason, my temporary user is stopped working. So I'm going to create another temporary user. So we'll call it temp user temp user. Okay, and again, we'll make it temporary user about 6 hours. Okay. Okay. So let's head back over here. Wait, what did I call it? Temp user. Okay, there we go. Temp user, I go to URL. No, I want to go to my backend. Update my .env. And this is going to be temp user. Temp user. Okay. Okay, so now that we've updated that, let's go in here and let's see here. Let's try this again. npm start on the back end, and we're connected to MongoDB, so we should be back in action. Okay. Okay. So let me go back to our React app. Jesus.map's not a function, so that means we're not getting an array. That is not what it got. So we need to investigate. Okay. So what I can do is I can go head over the network, take a look for that API call. See, there's the cheese API call. I said it failed to fetch 4000 / cheese. Response, no response. Okay. So in that case, let's go examine what I see in the terminal here and see it errors out. And I think I have an idea why. Let me go back to my controllers. Let's see here. Await. That is the get route, which is get cheese. Yes. Okay, figured it out. What happened was I didn't give enough permissions to that new temp user. I forgot to give them like the ability to read and write the databases, so that's why we were getting the issues there. So now we're in good shape. Okay, so always make sure you're checking your permissions. So many little things. So many little things. Okay, so now it is running, but again, it's working on a fresh database now, so there's no cheeses in there right now. So right now we can't see any cheeses, but it is working. So now let's actually create the ability to create a cheese. I mean, we do have, we do have that route built out. So if we go back to our router, we see that we do have a route to create. Let's make use of it. Okay. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function for creating. So like basically when this form gets submitted to this route, what happens? Okay. So we need to give that what's called an action. Okay. So we're going to do that again, and I'm going to import URL from /URL. That'll be the URL. And we're going to say export const, we'll call it the create action because it's the action for the create form. We want to create a thing. Okay, now in this case, we do need the request. Okay, so generally there's two things you can get out of that argument, which is the request and params. Those are the two main things you'd want to get out of there. Okay. And essentially what we want to do is we want to get the form data. So const form data equals await request.form data. And yes, for me to use the await, I do need to use the async keyword. Okay. Now, once I have the form data, then what I want to do is I want to construct the new cheese. So const new cheese equals an object. Again, the cheese has two properties: the name, which is going to be the form data dot get, and we want to get the data from the form that is the name. And then we're going to want the tasty property. Is it tasty? Okay. Form data dot get, and we want to get the property that is called tasty. that will create the new cheese. Okay. And, you know, we might, this is going to be a checkbox, so we might have to work with that later, but we'll come back to that. And what we're going to do is then we create the API call. So I'm going to say await fetch URL plus /cheese, except this is going to be a method of post, but we're sending over JSON data, so we're going to need some headers. So we need to make sure that the content type header is set to application JSON, so that way the server knows it's receiving JSON data. Then we need to actually send over that JSON data in the body of the request. So let's stringify that new cheese, stringify, turn it to a JSON string. The new cheese, okay, and then that should do the thing. And then what I want to do is redirect the user back to one of the other routes. So I'm going to return the result of the redirect function. The redirect function is, okay, it's not detecting it right away, so I'm going to just have manually import it. But essentially I would redirect them to a particular route, which I want to redirect them back to the main page, the index route. So I just have to import redirect. No, it's from React Router DOM. Redirect from React Router DOM. Okay, and then I can redirect user to a particular route. So basically, whenever this action is triggered, it's going to go take that form data and make a new thing. And then all I have to do is just connect this action to the route. So I'll say action equals create action. Okay, although this doesn't want to automatically import things for me right now. Boohoo. Create action. Okay. Cool. So that route is all set up. So now all I have to do is just add the form. So now I head over to index and my pages, and I'm going to add a form. And from React Router DOM, there's a component called form, okay, that does this for us. Okay, so I just say, hey, there's a form. And I'm going to say, hey, when this form is submitted, it should submit to this route. So /create. And the method should be post. That's how the route knows to do an action. So post. And then I just build out my form. Okay, I don't have to do any fun. If you've ever done a controlled form in React where you have to do like a handle change function and track it and then, sync it with state and do all these machinations, you won't have to do any of that. Okay, this form will just work. Okay, whenever you submit this form, it'll just run the action you attach to that route. Okay, so making life really easy. So I just have to make sure I just put the right inputs in there. So we're going to want an input of type equals text, because that's going to be where we type in the name of the cheese. So we're going to have to give it a name property of name, because the name is going to determine what the name of the property is in that form data object. Okay, and then, yeah, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to want another input. But since it's true or false, I want to type equals checkbox. Okay, name equals tasty. Okay. And then we just want a button to submit. I'll just use a button tag and say create new cheese. And there we go. That's it. That's all it takes. So now I have this form here. So now I can be like, I want to create a cheese called Gouda that is tasty, and I hit create new cheese. Okay, it failed to fetch, so now I'm going to examine what's going on. So let me go take a look to hit my API call, receive the request. Okay, looks like I'm having probably that same issue again where the user just now suddenly stopped working. So let's try this out. Let me restart this again. Let me go make this API call again, make sure it's working. It is working. Localhost 4000/cheese. I'm getting an empty array, so that's working. Now what happens if I make a post to it? Okay, that worked. So supposedly if I go back and refresh 3000, I should see there's Brie. Okay, so something is wrong with the way I wrote the request. Okay, so let's go back to our actions and let's take an examine. Make sure I wrote all the proper awaits. Okay, form data. More than likely here's going to be where we see the issue. I was kind of wondering if this would be an issue. So what I want to see is what we get from the checkbox, because I know checkboxes don't actually give you true or false. They give you checked or not checked. So let's console.log the way that it's represented in form data. Form data.get tasty. Okay, I want to check that out. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this fetch for a second, so that way that doesn't throw an error. Okay, so we'll just say Munster. I'll open up my console so I can see that console log. Hit the checkbox, and see that's what we get. We get this string of on. Okay, so now we know that. We can use that information to adjust what's happening. So in this case, I know that this is going to give me either on or probably not on. So I'm just going to say, hey, if this equals on, then this should be true. And if not, false. Okay, and there we go. That should fix that. Okay, so now let's try this again. Munster. Munster is tasty. And there, it works. We can create cheeses now. Okay, and see how easy that was to submit that form? Like literally, we just define the action here, we attach it to the route, and then I'm just adding a form that submits to that route. Okay, not a single use effect or use state in sight. Okay, which is killer, because if you ever set up like a form from scratch, it's quite involved in React. So this makes the whole experience much, much, much more pleasant. Okay, now let's move on to being able to see our cheeses now that we actually have cheeses we can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to our index. I want to make sure that each cheese has a link. Okay, so we're going to import that link tag from React Router DOM. That's so that we can create links between different pages. And I just say link, and then the 2 equals, and it's going to be 2 slash, and then the thing after the slash should be the cheese's ID. So cheese._ID. And then we're going to close that link tag. Oops, I self-closed it. And then we're going to close that link tag after the h1 slash link. Okay, so that way that h1 is going to be a link to the show page. Okay, so now I should be able to click on Brie, and it's going to take me to the show page for the thing of that ID. But right now I don't have the information on that cheese. Okay, well we have other routes, so we can put that to work. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create a loader for the show page. So we're going to take advantage of the show route we created in our backend and create a loader that makes an API call for it. So I'm going to go back to my loaders and create another loader. I can always just start with my previous one, but this one's going to be called the show loader because it's for our show route. And in this case, it is going to grab something based on the params. So we can grab the params from what's coming in there. And again, how do you know these things? Documentation. Okay, or you watch videos like this. Okay, so params are coming in. I'm going to grab those params. And now what I can do is I can say, hey, I want to make a request to /cheese/ and then put the ID in here, params.id. Okay, and that's going to grab that URL param because again, that route takes a param. Okay, so loaders, show loader, I'm going to grab that. And again, it's grabbing a single cheese, so let's make sure our variable names are sensical and semantic. Okay, there we go. So this is going to return us a single cheese. Good. And now all I have to do is just attach it to that route. So I'm going to go import the show loader and attach that to the show route. There we go. That loader will run each time that route loads. Okay, so now I can head over to show, bring in that use data loader, or use loader data hook. And then I can go grab the cheese, const cheese, use loader data. And I can just be like section h1 cheese.name. h2, and then again we can just do the ternary operator, so we can be like cheese.tasty. If it is true, we'll say it's tasty, and if it is not, then we'll write not tasty. Yay for ternary operators. Okay, so let's see here. That should all work now. I should be able to go back, see if I can click on Munster, and it shows me Munster's tasty. It's actually, again, when this show component loads, it's hitting our show route and making that request. And I should be able to actually see that in the logs for our backend. See, I can see that request came in. So see, like that show route request came in on our Morgan logs. So I can see that those requests are coming in. Okay, so very neat. Again, so it makes this whole process really easy. I can think of routes in a more consistent way on back end and front end. My show route matches up with the show route in the front end. My index, everything kind of matches. And it's just more easier to think through. Okay, so now we just have to do update and delete. So it just comes down to the same thing where we submit a form to a particular action. So we just need to create 2 more actions. So I'm going to copy the initial action we already created for the create because it's not too different for update. So we're going to have our update action. The only difference is that the update route does take a param, so I'm also going to want params. Okay, but otherwise this is going to pretty much be the same. I don't really need this console log anymore in either place. So I'll just get rid of those console logs. Okay, that should all form. The only difference then now is that at the end of the URL, instead of /cheese, it should be /cheese/id. So I'm going to do this, /cheese/params.id. Okay, and then again, it should be a put request now because it's the update route. And the rest stays the same. And this should probably be called updated cheese because we want to keep our variable name semantic. We are updating the cheese. It's not a new cheese. Okay, and there you go. There's your update route. And then again, when it's done updating, it just redirects you back to the main page. And let's just might as well do delete while we're here. Delete's even simpler. So with delete, you don't need any of this. You don't need any form data, so you don't even need the destructure of the request. You just need params. Delete. Okay, here we're not going to need any of this. Okay, so it just becomes that, and then we make a delete request. That's it. It's the delete request of that URL, and our API should delete the thing, because that's what we coded out in the backend. And yeah, so basically we have one for each thing you want to do. So again, you think of each action as a thing you're doing, and then I can submit a form and it does that thing. It takes that action. Okay, so now I can just go to my show route. We're going to make some forms. So let me go import the form component. Now for the update form, it's going to be pretty much like the one we created in index. So I can pretty much copy this form because it's the same fields. So I'm going to do that. And I am going to put under this the form, except now you're going to be updating the cheese. And then the form should be pre-populated. So the one thing here is that instead of using the value prop, you're going to use the default value prop. Okay, so that way you don't have to worry about, like, again, controlled form stuff. So default value is going to be whatever the cheese's name is now. Okay. Now for the input box, basically it's more going to be like whether checked is true. So checked is going to equal, okay, it's going to equal whatever cheese.tasty is. Okay. And that should do it. Update.cheese. And then we need to make sure this submits to the right place. So this is going to submit to update / and we need to make sure that it has the ID number in there. So we're going to use curly brackets. And then we're going to use backticks. And we're going to say /update /cheese ._id. Okay. And then we're going to make a form for a delete button. So let me just make another form. Because then again, each form submits to a different thing. So this one's going to submit to /delete / the cheese ID. And we don't need any of these inputs because it's just a delete button. So here we just put delete cheese. Okay, and again, this form will submit to the delete route. This one will submit to the update, which based on our routers, we need to make sure that it's going to trigger those actions. I go over here, action equals update action. But I got to make sure I import it. So update action and delete action. So those are imported. And then I got to again attach the actions. And that's it. We should be able to do full CRUD now. Okay, so now I'm looking at it. I can see I can now update the cheese. So if I were to call this Monster 2, and let's say it's no longer tasty. Oh, well, we'll have to fix that. Okay, we'll hit update. It did not update. Okay, so we'll have to check on that. Something did not sit right there. Okay, well let's check to see if the delete one works. If I click delete. Nope, that didn't delete either. Okay. Okay, this should be mutable. Use default check. Otherwise, okay, we should use default check for that one. Okay, so that's one thing to know. So let's go back to that form. Thank you for good errors in your terminal. Thank you React, and thank you React Router DOM for writing good errors that are helpful. Show. So we're going to change that to default checked because that's what the warning told us. Okay, always read your errors. Your errors oftentimes actually give you information that helps. Okay, a lot of people just skip over them and be like, oh, I guess it doesn't work. Okay, so that should at least fix that issue. So if I click on Brie, can I uncheck this now? Yeah, that takes care of that. Now, again, I want to change this to Brie 2, but it doesn't change it. So let's take a look at network here. And this made a put request. Let's take a look at the response. Null. It's making a request to the right URL. So that makes me wonder, why not? So let's try it out in Insomnia. Okay, so if I go to, first I want to go look up cheeses, get cheese. I have Munster there. I'm going to take Munster's ID. I'll just take Bree's ID since Bree's information is right there. I should be able to go here, make a put, and then change this to like Bree 2. And I get back null. So something's up with our update route. See, that's what happens when you don't test all your routes. Okay, so I need to go back to the back end, look at my controllers, cheese. Let's go take a look at update. Dot put, find by ID and update. Rec.params.id. That's the issue there. Okay. Okay, so let me and this is also going to be wrong. Params.id. Okay, so see those little characters. Okay. So we restart. Oops, I started the wrong app. I want to restart the back end because I'm running in the production mode. Okay. So now it should all work. So if I click on Brie, and I update this to Brie 2 and make it not tasty. Now it's Brie 2, not tasty. Good. So it updates. And then if I click delete, it's gone. Okay, simple as that. Okay, so that's essentially how you do it. There's a few more little tribulations throughout this journey, but that's the basic idea. Again, we're not having to play so much with like use state and use effect. Actually, I don't think we used a single use state or use effect this whole time. Thanks to React Router, we're able to kind of do that in a much more sort of like way that leads into web standards. And this is kind of like the beauty of React Remix, because React Remix basically that's where a lot of this comes from, because the people who make React Router are the people who make React Remix. So if you like this style, React Remix is probably a framework you should really look into, because you get this plus you get all the backend built into your app. So you can build it instead of having to build a separate Express app. You have everything just kind of there in Remix, where you can build your backend there too. So that's pretty cool. So that's the build of the app. I'll probably do another video where we can talk more about like styling, because right now this doesn't look super pretty. Okay. But I'll see you then. I'll see you in the next video.